When you create macros and write code in Excel, you can sometimes end up with bugs, problems in your code. And so it's important to know that there's some really effective debug tools in the Excel Visual Basic Editor. I've opened up the file Chapter 4 and I'm going to the Visual Basic Editor. Chapter 4 appears in my Project Explorer as a VBA project. A VBA project is basically a file and everything that's in that file in terms of objects and modules. One of the options that you have available to you is to compile the VBA project, and that is to ask Excel to check for any obvious errors in the code. To compile your VBA project, simply go to Debug in the menu and choose the first option, Compile VBA Project. It will quickly check the entire project, that is all sub-procedures and all modules, for any obvious errors. And in this case, in Chapter 4, it didn't find any. If I go back to debug, it's now dim because it's been done. Having compiled the VBA project, I would also recommend that you bring up the Debug Toolbar. If you right-click the menu bar or any existing toolbar, you'll be able to turn on Debug. And this is the Debug Toolbar here. You can move it, position it, drag it by this little column of dots, and place it exactly where you want it to go. So now I have my standard toolbar, my edit toolbar, and to the right of my edit toolbar I have my debug toolbar. The debug toolbar has got buttons we're familiar with. For example, there's a double up on the run button. It's in the debug toolbar, but it's also in the standard toolbar, and we've used that before. We've even used the reset button when we've been stepping into code and then we want to reset the code because we need to stop it and make a change. That's also duplicated between these two. There's also something called breakpoint. Breakpoints we've touched on in earlier chapters, but how we've created the breakpoint is simply by clicking in this grey panel here. This puts a point at which the code will stop. When you run the code, it will slam on the brakes and stop at this point. You are then able to walk and then perhaps run again. You can create as many breakpoints simply by clicking in this area, and you can remove them by clicking again. You can also click on a statement and press the key F9. The function key F9 will turn on and turn off breakpoints. And now we also have a button called Toggle Breakpoint on our Debug Toolbar. The whole idea here, if you haven't already found this out, is that when you're actually stepping through code, you may decide I now want to run until I hit the breakpoint. So I press F5 and the code runs and stops at the breakpoint. I can then press F8 and step, and if I press F5 it will run until it hits the breakpoint. It then enables me to perhaps reverse, make some changes, and step or run again. And ultimately I'll reset it. And I can turn these breakpoints off. So breakpoints are very good, particularly if you had code that looped a lot. You can actually ask it to run and do all the looping and then stop and walk. So it's that sort of scenario. Another useful debug tool is the immediate window. I'm going to close Chapter 4 and I won't save. And I'm going to open the file Chapter 11 and go to my Visual Basic Editor. Chapter 11 had two functions. They were commission and they were income tax. And we can go to the Excel worksheet and we can test various values and what results those functions will throw at us. But sometimes we want to test a function actually in the Visual Basic Editor, and it's actually the immediate window that allows us to do this. When I look up in my Debug Toolbar and I look at this particular button with a red exclamation mark, that will bring up the immediate window, and so will Control G. So I'm going to click that button, and here's my immediate window here. It's resizable. You can also close it with this X, and you can bring it back with this button. But let's say I want to test various commissions. In the immediate window, which used to be called the debug window, we type question mark and the name of the function. And then in the brackets, we test various figures. So if I was to put 0 and press enter, I will get 0 commission. But if I was to change that 0 to 1,000 and press enter, I get $100 commission, 10%. If I change that commission to 5,000 and press enter, I will be entitled to 25% commission, which is 1250. And if I change it to 10,000, I will get 3,000 commission. The immediate window will allow you to test various values and what that function will return in terms of a result, and make sure that it's throwing the right results. Because it's not a sub-procedure, we can't press F8. It's a function, so we have to use something like the immediate window to help us. What's quite common also with the immediate window is to use debug print statements, because the immediate window used to be in old versions called the debug window, so the word debug has stayed. Let's test this theory. If I, for example, was going to test this particular case, I would ask it to put a debug print, and I would tell it that this is case 1 in double quotes. Case 1 over 10,000. I'll take a copy of that and I'll show you how this works. I'll paste it into here. This is 5,000 and this is actually case 2. This here is in fact 1,000 and is case 3. And lastly, this is case 4 and that's equals 0. Okay, let's just tidy up this debug or immediate window by deleting excess statements. I now want to click on that commission statement, as you can see here, and press enter. It tells me that the answer is 3,000 and it comes from case 1 because it was over 10,000, over or equal to. If I change it to 5,000, press enter, the debug print statement prints to the debug or the immediate window saying this result 1250 came from case 2, which is for over 5,000. If I change that to 1,000 and press enter, case 3, and if I change it to 0, this result 0 comes from case 4 because it equals 0. So debug print statements can help you figure out from what if or else if area the result's coming from, or from what select case area it's coming from. And we can just as easily delete those debug print statements once they've done their job. We can also clear the immediate window, just delete and close the immediate window. And so that's your immediate window and the debug print statements. Another debug useful tool is the locals window. For this I'm going to close chapter 11 and I won't save, and I'm going to open chapter 10 done, and I'll go back to the Visual Basic Editor. In here we have two modules. Mod Calc is the one I want to go to, and I want to click on Calc GST. This particular window called Locals is with regards to variables particularly, and constants, but mainly variables. The Locals window is turned on by clicking this button here. When I click this button, very similar to the immediate window, it appears at the bottom here. Again, it can be resized, and again it can be closed, and again it can be brought up at any time by clicking this button. The whole idea is that when you actually run or step through code, it will show you all the variables in that procedure and what they're worth at any particular point in time. So let's just test this. If I press F8, it immediately throws me here Mod Calc. If I expand it or collapse it, I can see what's inside that module or not. By expanding it, I can see that there's two variables. One is my sales and one is my GST. If I press F8 in my code, they are both worth 0 at this point in time, and they are both the data type single, which is a number and allowing decimal places. If I press F8 again and I give it my username and press F8 and give it an amount, it's disappeared. The whole idea is that you can actually step through and see what something is worth, and if I've actually put them side by side, that might help, and step through it again. And I'll put this, excuse me for a second, I'm just going to put these side by side. So I'm going to press F8 and I'll just expand that. You can see they're both got values, and I'll just press F8, cancel that, end that. Let's just do that again. Okay, so I'll press F8, I'll expand that particular sub-procedure. They're both worth 0 and they're both declared as singles. I'll press F8 again, F8 again. It'll ask for a username. I'll type Cathi and OK. And I'll press F8 again and I'll enter a sales figure, 100,000. And boom, you can suddenly see the sales figure is 100,000. So I actually, sorry about the mucking around a little bit, but I needed you to see both of these things side by side. And if I press F8 again, you can see now that the GST is worth 15,000, the sales is still 100,000, and so it's telling you the value of those variables as you run through the code. Up till now, we've just been simply resting on the variables to find out what they're worth at any point in time, and that's useful too. And I'll reset the code just by hitting the blue square. So that's the purpose of the local windows, is to see what variables are worth at any point in time. And I'll close the local window. And I'll close the Visual Basic Editor